He watched as his lawyer ground me into dust. The owner of the clinic, a celebrity. He was taking everything from me, including Edelweiss, my brainchild, my life. He waited for tears. I shocked him. I stood up and renounced all my property to him. The room fell silent. My husband laughed, thinking I was broken. He didn't understand that this wasn't the end, but the beginning. When they take away not only your business but also your unborn child, you stop playing by the rules. He thought I left destitute. He didn't know I'd gone to war. I'd already made my first move. Hello, dear listeners. I'm pleased to welcome you. I present to you a new, interesting story. Enjoy listening. We therefore demand the equal division of the apartment at 7 Lesnaya Street, 2 cars, and all bank accounts in the names of Artyom Pavlovich Semyonov and Polina Ivanovna Semyonova, including deposit and investment accounts, as well as a 100% stake in the authorized capital of Edelweiss LLC. The voice of Sergei Viktorovich, Artyom's lawyer, sounded like the scraping of metal on glass. Every word was carefully crafted, honed to inflict the most pain possible. He paused deliberately on the name of the flower shop, as if savoring the moment. Polina sat with her hands clasped in her lap. Her fingers were cold, and her lips trembled treacherously. Edelweiss. Her flower shop, her brainchild and refuge all at once. A place she'd created from scratch, pouring sleepless nights, her thorn-scarred fingers, and her whole soul into it, long before Artyom, with his money and connections, came into her life. Across from her sat her husband, the owner of Medea, a man from the cover of business magazines, a successful private clinic. A perfect suit, an expensive watch, on his face a mask of bored superiority. The corner of his lips lifted slightly in a smug smirk. He wasn't just attending the trial, he was enjoying the spectacle of his wife, once brilliant and confident, now being reduced to nothing. I object, Your Honor, said Anna Viktorovna, Polina's lawyer. Her young face flushed with indignation. The Edelweiss store was founded by my client a year before her marriage. We have the incorporation documents. This is her personal, non-jointly held property. Sergei Viktorovich didn't even turn to look at her, addressing the judge directly. Your Honor, during the marriage, my client invested significant funds in this business, over 2 million, as confirmed by bank statements. Therefore, the enterprise was significantly improved using the spouse's joint funds and is subject to division on a general basis. Repayable aid, not investments, Anna almost shouted. Polina Ivanovna returned every ruble. Here's the receipt for the transfers. Ah, colleague, leave the drama, Sergei Viktorovich drawled lazily, waving his hand. We all understand what kind of transfers those were. Payment for personal needs, nothing more. Women's whims. My client was generous, that's all. Artyom chuckled quietly, approving of his lawyer's attack. His wife's humiliation was becoming almost physically palpable, thick as fog. The judge, a woman with insightful, tired eyes, turned her saccharine lawyer's gaze to his client. Her gaze betrayed poorly concealed disgust. Irina Petrovna had seen hundreds of such trials, but the cynicism unfolding before her exceeded all expectations. She looked at Polina, pale and motionless, like a porcelain figurine about to crack. Irina Petrovna was about to intervene, to call the lawyer to order, but at that moment a ringing silence fell over the courtroom. It was broken by a quiet, yet crystal-clear voice. I refuse. Polina's words were quiet, but everyone heard them. What, excuse me? Sergei Viktorovich was the first to come to his senses, deciding he had misheard. Polina slowly raised her head. Her eyes, so recently full of pain, were now calm and clear. She looked straight ahead, not at her husband, not at the lawyers, but somewhere into the void behind the judge. I renounce everything in favor of my husband, excuse me, ex-husband. The silence in the courtroom thickened to the limit. Anna Viktorovna turned to her client. Shocked bewilderment was frozen on her face. She opened her mouth to say something, but found no words. Artyom, who had been lazily examining his cuffs, froze. His smirk slid off his face, replaced by confusion. A second later, he burst into loud, mocking laughter that echoed throughout the courtroom. Finally showed some common sense, he shouted, wiping away a tear that had welled up from laughter. You realize that fighting me is useless. Bravo. His lawyer smiled smugly, shrugging his shoulders, as if to say, that's all there is to it. The judge slammed the gavel. Quiet, but powerfully. Artyom's chuckle cut off on its highest note. Silence in the courtroom. Irina Petrovna's voice was cold as steel. She kept her eyes on Paulina. Plaintiff, you understand the consequences of your statement. You renounce your share of the jointly acquired property. Yes, Your Honor. Paulina spoke calmly, and there was not a shadow of doubt in her voice. I understand everything and renounce everything in favor of my husband. I need only one thing. She paused and, for the first time in the entire hearing, looked straight into the eyes of Artyom. Freedom. Paulina's gaze was direct and clear, like a spring stream. There was no hatred or malice in it, only a cold, final determination. The smirk on her husband's face gave way to suspicion. He expected tears, hysteria, a fight for every vase and every share. As a businessman, he had prepared himself to break his wife at length and with relish, relishing every defeat, but all he got was calm and dignity in the face of total defeat. This was wrong and definitely unsettled him. Something was clearly wrong. Irina Petrovna, an experienced psychologist by nature, caught this change in the defendant's mood. She immediately saw a predatory glimmer of suspicion flash in Artyom's eyes. The court is adjourning for 15 minutes, she said, standing. Paulina Ivanovna, please follow me into the office. The heavy oak door closed, cutting off the noise from the hallway. The judge's office smelled of old books and good coffee. Irina Petrovna pointed to a chair and sat down opposite, taking off her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose tiredly. Paulina Ivanovna, I've been a judge for over 20 years and, frankly, I've seen all sorts of things. I've seen women broken by grief, women ready to tear each other's throats out over an antique chest of drawers. But what I saw today. The judge paused, peering intently into Paulina's face. Behind your decision, I see not weakness, but an enormous, frightening strength. What's really going on? You're afraid of your husband. You're being pressured. Her voice was filled with genuine human concern. And this unexpected warmth pierced the armor Paulina had spent so long building around herself. An orphan since birth, the corners of her lips twitched, and the tears she'd so desperately held back in the courtroom welled up in her eyes. She quickly brushed them away with the back of her hand. No, Irina Petrovna, no one is pressuring me. This is my decision. But why? You understand that you're leaving your husband everything that rightfully belongs to you, your store. It means you're giving him a part of your life. Paulina hesitated for a moment. She wanted to tell this wise woman everything, she wanted to pour out all her pain, but she knew it wasn't time yet. In fact, her plan was as fragile as a butterfly's wing. Any careless word could destroy it. Irina Petrovna, some things are more valuable than money, she said quietly, finding the strength to meet the judge's gaze. I'm buying myself a future, a peaceful future where I won't have to see his face every day and remember. She hesitated. The judge waited, taking her time. Remembering that, Paulina Ivanovna, the reason for your divorce wasn't just that your personalities didn't get along. True. I read the case materials. It's a standard formulation, but I feel that behind it there's something more hidden. And then Paulina decided not to tell the whole truth, but the part of it that explained the pain. A year ago, I lost my baby. Paulina's voice broke, turning into a whisper. I was 3 months pregnant. It was a very late and very much wanted pregnancy. We had waited for it so long. The judge nodded sympathetically. Her face softened. Please accept my condolences. Ironically, that evening I returned home early and found Artyom and his young assistant, Natalia, in our bedroom, on our bed. Every word came out with difficulty, as if she were walking on broken glass. The doctor said it provoked the miscarriage, and my husband, without even apologizing, said, "It's your fault that I probably wasn't careful enough." Artyom accused me of losing his air, and then simply began to neglect me, as if I were a defective object that had failed its sole function. The reason for our divorce wasn't the cooling of our relationship, but the fact that my husband killed everything alive in me and our child as well. In the judge's office there was silence, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Irina Petrovna looked at her with deep sympathy. Now everything fell into place. This was not a division of property, but a real escape. "I understand everything," the judge said softly, "and I will not criticize you or dissuade you. If freedom is what you need, then so be it. But I cannot simply accept your statement today. I must be sure that you act without coercion and fully understand the consequences. Therefore, I'll schedule the next hearing in a week. Think again. Trust my experience, there's no need to rush in such cases." "I won't change my mind," Polina said firmly, standing up. "I understand," Irina Petrovna nodded. "But formalities are formalities." When Polina left the office, and then the courtroom, Artyom's laughter overtook her again. He was standing on the steps of the building, and next to him, flirtatiously pressing herself against his shoulder, a bright blonde froze. Polina knew it wasn't Natalia. This was already a new passion, Karina. "How do you like it?" Artyom spoke loudly, making sure Polina could hear. "My ex-wife turned out to be not such a fool. She decided not to get involved and left with nothing." "Well, that's commendable." Karina laughed a thin, unpleasant laugh. Polina didn't turn around. She simply walked forward, feeling their gazes on her back and the laughter that could no longer hurt her. She moved to a safe distance, turned the corner and took out her phone. She dialed her best friend's number. "Alia, hi. Polina, so how did it go? I hope that bastard is okay." "I did it." "What did you do? Keep the store?" "No, I left everything to him." A shocked silence fell on the other end of the line. "Are you crazy? How could you leave everything?" "I did it the way I wanted. Everything is going according to plan." "What plan?" "You were left with nothing. This is not normal. I can't explain everything to you yet. Just believe me, the main thing is that Artyom bought it." Polina hung up, not giving her friend the opportunity to ask any more questions. She walked slowly through the autumn city, the cold wind ruffling her hair. A plan? Yes, she had one. There was definitely a plan. A carefully thought out, risky, but the only possible operation to save herself. It just so happened that during their marriage, Artyom, like a skilled puppeteer, had locked all the financial flows into himself. Her husband happily paid for her whims, bought her expensive gifts, but at the same time, he made sure she didn't have a single ruble of her own, not under his control. Artyom called it care, but in reality it was total control. But he didn't take one thing into account. A woman driven to despair is capable of snapping back. A few months before filing for divorce, when she already realized the marriage was dead, Polina began building a safety net. She remembered where she'd started, with small private orders for wedding bouquets and event decorations. She registered an anonymous profile on a florist forum under the nickname Flora. Orders began pouring in. Her style and taste were recognizable. She worked nights in a small studio she rented on the other side of town, while Artyom slept or spent time with yet another mistress. She didn't put every penny of the proceeds into a secret account that Artyom could trace. Paulina transferred them to a charity that supported the Nadezhda orphanage, the very same one where she grew up. The director, Elsa Ivanovna, a strict but kind woman who acted like a mother to her, was her only confidant. The money came as anonymous donations, but they had an agreement: if absolutely necessary, the foundation would return the funds to her as a grant to launch a social business project. It was legally pure and completely opaque to outsiders. Now, to start a new life, she needed access to these funds. And for that, Artyom needed to finally believe in her utter defeat and poverty, so that he would stop following her, erasing her from his life as an annoying misunderstanding. Her renunciation of all her property today was not capitulation. It was the bait that he, with all his greed, took. Lost in these thoughts, Paulina walked without paying attention to the road. Suddenly it started to rain. Large, cold drops pounded the asphalt. People rushed under the awnings and canopies of shops. Paulina also took shelter under the striped awning of a small coffee shop. This coffee shop, this rain, all of it instantly took her back a month, to the day when her first glimpse of Maxim Volkov appeared in her dull life. It had been raining then too. Paulina had just finished a secret order for an anniversary decoration and, tired, with the last bouquet of delicate cream roses she had no use for, was running to her car. The downpour came suddenly, and she also instinctively darted under the awning of the nearest coffee shop. She clutched the bouquet to her chest, afraid that the drops would damage the delicate petals. The door to the coffee shop opened, and a tall man in a simple t-shirt and jeans appeared on the threshold. He had kind, slightly tired eyes and warm dimples in his cheeks when he smiled. "Hide from the rain, come inside. It's warm here." "Thank you, I'll just be a minute," Paulina politely declined. She didn't want to talk to anyone. "Beautiful roses," the stranger said, nodding at the bouquet. "Someone will be very lucky." "No, they won't go to anyone," Paulina sighed. "They were left over." "That's not true," the man objected. "Flowers can't be left over." "Can I?" He carefully took the bouquet from her hands and inhaled the aroma. "My daughter adores roses. Can I buy them from you right now?" Paulina was confused. "But please, consider this payment for decorating the threshold of my coffee shop." And only then did Paulina realize that he was the owner. They started talking. It turned out that his name was Maxim, and it was a whole chain of coffee shops. The businessman spoke simply, without a shadow of pretentiousness, and something in his calm confidence and genuine kindness was captivating. Paulina sold him that bouquet, although she wanted to give it away for free, and he insisted on treating her to the best latte in the city. That's how their acquaintance began. And then, a week later, she met him in the most unexpected place, at the Nadezhda orphanage. Few knew that after a miscarriage and her husband's betrayal, she had sunk into a hopeless depression. The gynecologist, an elderly, wise woman, seeing her condition, advised, "Find those who are worse off than you. Help them. Sometimes, to save yourself, you need to start saving others." So, thanks to her, Paulina became a volunteer. Every weekend she came to Nadezhda, held floristry workshops for children, and helped tend to the flowers in the garden. This became her outlet. It was within the walls of the shelter that she met the kids who especially touched her heart. Kolya, a 6-year-old boy who stopped talking after he was taken from his alcoholic parents. He didn't make contact with anyone, sitting in a corner for hours staring at something. Paulina never tried to make him talk. She would just sit next to him and bring him the most beautiful flowers. "Look, this is a delphinium. It looks just like the blue sky. And this is a gerbera. It's like a little sun. Do you want to touch it?" One day, after several such encounters, the little boy timidly reached out and touched a velvet petal. For Paulina, it was a huge victory. And then there was Lena, an 8-year-old girl who drew all the time. All her drawings had the same scene: a house, the sun, and a happy family. Mom, Dad, a little girl. Is this your family? Paulina asked one day, looking over her shoulder. I hope it's like this, Lena answered seriously, like an adult. I draw it so I can find it faster. The older children say it works. True, I don't believe it, but I try. What if they take me? Paulina swallowed hard. She stroked the girl's head. A new family will definitely find you. Paulina came every weekend, until one day she saw Maxim Volkov in the carpentry workshop. The young businessman, surrounded by a crowd of older kids, was enthusiastically showing them how to make a birdhouse. As it seemed, carpentry had been his lifelong hobby. So, at least once a week, he came here to teach the kids how to work with their hands. To Paulina's surprise, the second meeting turned out to be warmer, like a reunion of old friends. And imperceptibly, they became friends through shared interests and an incredible desire to make these kids' childhoods at least a little better. Perhaps it was the similarity of their personalities and goals that gave them the idea to join forces. Listen, Paulina, you have amazing taste, Maxim said to her as they drank tea in Elsa Ivanovna's office. And I have 5 coffee shops with a large flow of people. Let's try it. We'll set up a beautiful stand, and you'll arrange small designer bouquets for them. We'll transfer part of the proceeds here. For Paulina, this proposal was a breath of fresh air. Something new, her own, and nothing to do with Edelweiss or Artyom. It was their little project and a shared secret. Gradually, while talking to him on weekends, Paulina learned his story. Maxim was a widower. His wife died 3 years ago, leaving him with Sonia. His daughter had a congenital heart defect, and Maxim dedicated his life to finding the best doctor and clinic for the complex surgery. He told how he once almost fell for the bait of a Moscow luminary, the owner of the fashionable Media clinic, who demanded exorbitant prices for the operation. They took money, offering no guarantees and an experimental method. Only a consultation with foreign specialists saved Maxim from taking a fatal step. It turned out the method was dangerous, and the price was 3 times higher. Maxim pronounced the doctor's name with undisguised contempt, Artyom Semyonov. At that moment, Paulina didn't mention that it was her husband. She was ashamed. Little Sonia, a charming girl with her father's huge eyes, often visited Edelweiss. She adored flowers and Paulina, who always treated her to marshmallows and allowed her to help arrange simple bouquets. It's worth noting that it was during one of these visits that the crucial conversation took place. Sonia's nanny, Valentina Stepanovna, a pleasant woman of pre-retirement age, a former nurse, accidentally learned who Paulina's husband was, and her expression changed. Later, when Sonia was enthusiastically sorting through ribbons, she took Paulina aside. Paulina Ivanovna, forgive my lack of tact, the nanny began haltingly. This is probably completely out of place. It's just that I used to work at your husband's clinic. Yes. You were surprised. He fired me for daring to ask uncomfortable questions. I worked in the operating room. In 15 years in the profession, not a single complaint or reprimand. And then, you see, I saw what expensive imported consumables your husband wrote off on paper and what cheap alternatives he actually used, especially for low-status patients. I tried to bring this to the attention of the Commission from the Ministry of Health, but they simply showed me the door, accusing me of slander. Valentina Stepanovna spoke in a whisper, but her eyes burned with righteous anger. Your husband is a very greedy and unprincipled man. Money doesn't smell to him. Beware of him. This conversation was the last straw. Paulina realized she was living with a monster for whom human fate was just a line in a business plan. Her personal tragedy was compounded by the realization of what a monster her husband had been. Then the plan for revenge took on a second, more important goal, not just to get back what was hers, but to restore justice. The sharp honk of a car's horn tore her from her train of memories. She was still standing under the coffee shop awning, soaking wet and freezing. The rain had stopped, and it was time to act. Although she and Artyom were no longer living together, Polina had officially moved out only today, calling a freight taxi and moving her few belongings from her luxurious apartment, full of dark memories, to a tiny room above a flower shop. Actually, it was an attic that she had converted into a resting place, so it was now her home. Artyom, whom she called to inform of her decision, was predictably generous. "Well, since I'm now the owner of this barn," her husband drawled lazily into the phone, "I can let you live there for a while and even work there for a nominal rent, considering it my parting gift, of course." Reveling in his power, her husband was certain she was broken and crushed, that she would cling to her little shop as the last reminder of her former life. Artyom didn't sense any threat in the air. He saw it as just further confirmation of his complete and utter victory. And that was exactly what Polina had been aiming for: lull him into a false sense of security and give him what he deserves. That evening, Maxim came into the store. His face was worried. "Polina, I heard there was a trial today. My lawyers, anyway, I heard rumors about your decision. Is it true?" She nodded, unpacking boxes of her books. "True, but why? You gave him everything, even Edelweiss. This is madness." The businessman came closer. His voice was filled with genuine concern. "I can help. I have the opportunity. We can buy the store from your ex-husband through a front man. He won't even know. Just name the price." His offer was so sincere and kind, but Polina shook her head. "Thank you, Maxim, truly, but that's not right." "Why?" "Because if Artyom suspects even the slightest interest in this store from anyone, and especially from me, he'll never sell it. Believe me, Artyom will keep it on principle, just to spite me or, conversely, to drive the price sky high. No, I need him to want to get rid of it himself, so that this store becomes a burden for him." Maxim frowned in confusion. "And how will you achieve this?" Polina smiled mysteriously. "You'll see." Few people knew that immediately after the trial she began her game, a subtle psychological one, designed to exploit her ex-husband's greatest weakness, his pathological greed. To this end, she deliberately began running the business at a loss, accidentally mixing up orders, delivering a wedding bouquet for a funeral and a funeral wreath for an anniversary. She forgot to water expensive orchids, and they died. She bought the cheapest, quickly wilting flowers, citing problems with suppliers. Regular customers, whom she had secretly warned through Olga, began calling Artyom with complaints and demands for compensation. The store, which had always been profitable, began to lose money. Artyom, initially oblivious, began to get nervous after a couple of weeks. He called her, yelled into the phone, called her incompetent and untalented. And Polina only sighed resignedly and said that without his wise guidance and financial support, she couldn't do anything. Artyom, for whom every penny wasted was a personal insult, quickly lost all interest in Edelweiss. He no longer saw it as a trophy, but as a problematic asset draining his pocket. Despite the skepticism of everyone around him, Polina's plan worked, but another surprise was soon in store. One evening, as she was closing the store, a young, beautifully dressed woman approached her. "Are you Polina Semyonova?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Yes, what do you want?" "My name is Alina Nikolskaya. I'm a former patient of your husband's." Polina tensed up. "And what did you expect?" Alina, stumbling over every syllable, told her story. Listening to her, Polina couldn't help but sympathize, understanding what she had gone through. The guest, with tears in her eyes, told about the botched plastic surgery at the Medea clinic, which disfigured her face. As it turned out, Artyom refused to admit his mistake and, having forged documents, threatened to sue for slander if the patient dared to seek help anywhere. "I know I'm not the only one," Alina added, sobbing. "The defect never came back to me. They fixed it. The doctors even called a meeting. They say a repeat operation is extremely dangerous because the facial nerves are close. In other words, it's better to sit tight and keep a low profile." Now I hide the scar with foundation. But you can't run from yourself. You only have to look in the mirror, and all the flaws are right there. I found a few more girls on closed forums online. We're all scared, but the clinic owner's lawyers are the best. He bought everyone. We want to file a class action lawsuit, but we don't have enough evidence. We need someone from the inside, someone who can confirm that he's a fraud. Paulina looked at her tear-stained face and saw in it a reflection of her own pain and the humiliation she'd experienced earlier. At that moment, she understood with utter clarity, her revenge wasn't just about money, it was about justice and about stopping the evil her husband had committed. "I'll help you," Paulina said firmly. "I know where Artyom might be keeping the documents. The problem is how to get them, but I think I can solve that." "Right?" Alina asked timidly and, seeing that her interlocutor was speaking seriously, she visibly calmed down. A cold, determined fire lit up Paulina's eyes. The game was entering its final stage, and in it, she was not a victim. On the contrary, she had overcome her innate reluctance. She hadn't realized that, although she had rejected her past, the past had found her. That evening, when Paulina, tired, was unpacking the last box of books in the tiny room above the store, there was a quiet knock on the door. Deep down, she expected to see Maxim or Olga, but a stranger stood on the threshold, a middle-aged man with kind, tired eyes and a briefcase in his hands. "Paulina Ivanovna Semyonova?" he asked a little timidly. "Yes, it's me." Her surprise was genuine. "My name is Oleg Igorevich. I'm a social worker from the Nadezhda orphanage." Her heart skipped a beat. Did something happen to the children, to Kolya, to Lena? No, don't worry, everything is under control." Oleg hastened to reassure her. "I have another matter, a personal one. Elsa Ivanovna gave me your new address and asked me to give you this personally in your hands." With these words, the man handed her an ordinary postal envelope, unstamped but sealed. On it, in a shaky, barely visible handwriting, was her name. "What is this?" Paulina asked, cautiously accepting the letter. Well, how should I put it? Basically, it's a message from a woman. She's currently in hospice." He took the bait, he's selling the store. "The signing is tomorrow." "Great," the businessman replied calmly. "My investor is ready. We'll be there, don't worry." On the day of the signing, Artyom's luxurious glass-and-chrome office at the Media Clinic was packed. Artyom himself sat at the head of the table, exuding his usual smugness. Opposite him stood a modestly dressed lawyer, supposedly representing a large network. Artyom, eager to get rid of the unprofitable asset as quickly as possible, didn't even bother to check the ultimate beneficiary of the deal. He signed the contract with a flourish. "Well, that's it," said the dealer with relief. "Congratulations to your boss on acquiring a headache." At that moment, the office door opened, and Paulina and Maxim appeared on the threshold. "I think I'm the one who deserves congratulations," said Maxim, smiling warmly. The lawyer stood up and nodded at him. "Maxim Andreevich, it's ready." Artyom's face lengthened in surprise. He glanced from Maxim to Paulina, his brain frantically trying to put two and two together. What? What does this mean? "Volkov, what are you doing here?" "I'm buying a flower shop for a very talented woman," Maxim replied, walking over and putting his hand on Paulina's shoulder. "Your ex-wife, a mediocrity, as you put it, dropped the value of the business so much in a month that I bought it for a third of its real price." "Thanks for the discount, Artyom Pavlovich." The realization of how masterfully he'd been conned hit Artyom. His face turned purple with rage. "You snake," he hissed at Paulina. "You orchestrated all of this. I will destroy you, I will sue you both." But he was not allowed to finish. The office door opened again. Andrei Vasilyevich Lodyanov stood in the threshold, and behind him were two men in formal suits with serious faces. "I'm afraid," Artyom Pavlovich, you won't be up to court any time soon. Logdanov said in an icy tone. Meet the representatives of the Ethics Commission and Ministry of Health Licensing. They really want to ask you a few questions. Artyom turned pale. Logdanov, what do you want here? On what grounds? Based on complaints from your former patients, for example, Alina Nikolskaya, Andrei Vasilyevich continued, and a dozen others. You know, Artyom Pavlovich, for many years I turned a blind eye to your, shall we say, questionable business practices. I didn't want to air quarrels in public, so as not to cast a shadow on our entire clinic. I collected information, patient testimonies, conversation recordings, evidence of your financial fraud. I've accumulated a whole dossier. He placed a weighty folder on the table. I thought you'd come to your senses, but when you dared to touch my daughter, my patience snapped. The Ministry of Health employees approached the table. Artyom looked at them with a hunted look. His empire was crumbling before his eyes, and the consequences were swift and devastating. His medical license was revoked, and a criminal case was opened against Artyom for large-scale fraud. The judge, having learned of the new circumstances, initiated a review of the property division case on her own initiative. The verdict was short, to annul Paulina's renunciation of her share and divide all jointly acquired property strictly equally. While Artyom's life was falling apart, Paulina's, on the contrary, was rising from the ashes, like a phoenix. And Maxim's daughter, Sonia, finally had surgery at the best Moscow clinic. Of course, this was not without Andrei Vasilyevich's participation. Paulina's father, using all his connections, personally oversaw every stage. Paulina spent her biological mother's last days by her side. There were always 3 people in the hospice room now, she, Ludmila Stepanovna, and Andrei Vasilyevich. Of course, they weren't trying to make up for lost years, but simply being there, holding each other's hands, and in this silent union there was more love and forgiveness than any words. Ludmila passed away quietly in her sleep, with a smile on her face. She found peace a minute after dawn, when the sun's rays gently touched her cheek. Paulina began to cry softly, and her father gently touched her shoulder. Don't cry. Mom has been through a lot, but I'm sure she was very happy in the last days of her life. It took Paulina a while to realize it. Month after month passed, and the belated love for her late mother only grew stronger. Maxim was always there, like a silent guard, protecting her peace. Andrei Vasilyevich also did not stand aside, surrounding his daughter with a care she hadn't known since childhood. 6 months passed. One evening, when Paulina and Maxim were sitting in the renewed, shining Edelweiss, he took her hand. I know how much you've been through, and maybe now isn't the time, but I can't stay silent any longer. I love you, and I fell in love with you back then, in the rain, when you were hiding your bouquet of roses. I want all the bouquets in your life to be just for you. For the first time in many years, Paulina, without fear of the future, reciprocated. And a month later they got married and did what they dreamed of for so long. They took Kolya and Lena. The silent boy, caught in an atmosphere of love and care, said a few months later his first word. And it's no surprise that that word was, Mom. And then Lenotchka finally drew her main picture, a big house, the son, Mom Paulina, Dad Maxim, and 3 children, Sonia, Kolya, and herself. After their honeymoon, the couple combined their businesses, creating a unique chain of coffee and flowers. These weren't just stores, but rather islands of hope, providing jobs for women in difficult life situations, helping them start over. Among other things, Paulina became Nadezhda's official guardian, returning her debt to the place that had once saved her. A year later, on a bright sunny day, children were laughing in the garden of a large country house. A fully recovered Sonia was playing ball with Kolya and Lena, while Paulina and Maxim sat hugging each other on the veranda. If you liked this story, subscribe to stay up to date with new heartwarming stories and leave a comment. I'm always interested in your opinion. I decided to give you to those who could take care of you. You see, the day before, I had just seen an article in the local newspaper about the opening of a new orphanage. There was a photo of the director, a young woman with kind eyes, Elsa Ivanovna. I swaddled you in my only nice blanket, wrote a note with your name and date of birth, and took you to the doors of the brightest and cleanest place I could find. I really wanted that woman with the photograph to find you. I left you and ran away without looking back, because I knew, if I look back, I'll come back and destroy us both. After that, they found me on the street, as they said, in a state of insanity. Long months in a psychiatric hospital, then attempts to start a new life, but the shadow of that act haunted me always. Moreover, I immediately decided that I had no right to interfere in my daughter's life. I betrayed her once already. A tear slowly rolled down Paulina's cheek. I would have taken this secret to the grave, Ludmilla finished, but when I found out I was dying, I realized I couldn't. I had to tell you the truth. This is the last thing I can give you. Not God knows what. But still. She raised herself with difficulty on her elbows and pointed to an old cardboard box under the bed. There's everything I have left from that life, from him. Well, your father. Paulina, as if in a dream, approached and with trembling hands opened the box. Inside lay yellowed photographs of a young, happy couple, a stack of letters tied with a ribbon, and a heavy leather-bound book. An old surgical journal. Paulina opened it. On the flyleaf, in calligraphic handwriting, was written, "To my future wife, Lucy, together we will conquer any peak. Your André." Paulina carefully picked up one of the photographs. In it, a young, smiling, dark-haired man was hugging her mother. Everything in the picture seemed perfect, if not for one thing. His face took Paulina's breath away. She knew this man. Only the face was aged, furrowed with wrinkles, with a stern, impenetrable expression. It was Dr. Andrei Vasilyevich Lozhanov, a leading surgeon from the neighboring building of the Media Clinic. A legend, a man with an impeccable reputation and a difficult character. They had crossed paths several times at corporate events. Artyom introduced her to him, and then always spoke disparagingly of him behind his back. Old school, her husband snorted. A relic mammoth. While he was out there collecting his bones the old-fashioned way, we were making money on innovation. It's Lozhanov, Paulina whispered, not believing her eyes. Yes, Andrei Vasilyevich, your father, Ludmilla confirmed. I beg you, daughter, don't look for him, don't ruin his life. He's probably been happy for a long time. He has a family, children. He never found out about you. Let it stay that way. But for Paulina, it was no longer a question of ruining someone else's life. It was a question of her own identity. Her entire life, which she considered built on emptiness, suddenly found roots, painful, tragic, but her own. The first thing Paulina did after hugging her mother was head to the much-hated clinic. Lozhanov's office door was always tightly closed. Everyone at the clinic knew that distracting the professor over trivial matters would be a big mistake. Paulina stood in front of the door for several minutes, hesitating to knock. In her bag was that very surgical journal. It seemed unwieldy. Finally, taking a deep breath, she knocked and, without waiting for an answer, entered. Lozhanov was sitting at his massive oak desk, reviewing X-rays. He looked up at her with a stern, uncomprehending look. I'm listening. What's your question? He didn't recognize her. Semyonov's wife was one of many who flitted across the dull banquets. Paulina couldn't utter a word. She simply walked up to the table and silently placed an old leather-bound journal in front of him. Lozhanov looked down. For a second, his face was expressionless. Then his brows slowly drew together. He reached out distrustfully and touched the cover, as if afraid it was a mirage. He opened the journal to the first page and saw the inscription he had made almost 40 years ago. His hand trembled. The face that had always seemed carved from stone truly turned to stone. All the color drained from it. The doctor slowly looked up, and in his stern, piercing eyes, she saw neither anger nor surprise, but an abyss of pain, regret, and recognition. He wasn't looking at her, but through her, seeing the features of the woman he had lost so many years ago. Ludmilla. His voice, usually loud and confident, sounded like a quiet groan. Paulina's throat tightened. "I am your daughter, Paulina." Andrei Vasilyevich closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, tears were in them. "I know," he said quietly. "I always knew I had a daughter. It's just a shame I didn't know her name, but fate brought us together anyway." As it turned out, the truth was even more harsh and piercing. A month after the escape, the man maddened by grief and rage, Andrei, accidentally arriving in that very city on business, saw her on the street. She was crossing the road with a stroller, and one glance was enough for him to understand everything. Andrei wanted to rush to her, demand an explanation, but pride, resentment, and the pain of betrayal were stronger. The young doctor decided she had made her choice and didn't want him in her life or the life of their child. Ultimately, being a man of principle, however cruel, he decided to respect her choice, turned around, and never looked for her again. However, Andrei never married, devoting his entire life to his work. This conversation changed everything. It was long, difficult, full of unsaid words and 40 years of pain. When Paulina, having finally found her father, told him her story about Artyom, the miscarriage, the humiliating divorce, and the plan with the store, Andrei Vasilyevich's face from sorrowful turned furious. "This puppy," he hissed through clenched teeth, "is a huckster in a white coat. He dared to do this to my daughter. Well, he will deeply regret it." The meeting with the father radically changed the balance of power. Andrei Lozhinov was not just a doctor. He was a pillar of the medical community, a man whose word was law, and whose reputation was impeccable. Now all the power of his authority was directed at protecting his newfound daughter. Artyom, driven to the brink of insanity by the daily reports of Edelweiss's losses, called Paulina and cursed. "You're a real mediocrity," he shouted into the phone. "You managed to ruin a profitable business in a month. I'm not going to invest another penny in this flower dump of yours." "It's a pity," Paulina replied meekly. "I'm still trying. I don't care about your efforts. I'm selling it. I found buyers. A large chain of gift shops. They're taking it for next to nothing. But I want to get rid of it. I'll sign everything tomorrow. So pack your things and go wherever you want." My husband hung up, and Paulina immediately called Maxim. "What does this have to do with me?" Oleg sighed, embarrassed. "She claims to be your biological mother." The world beneath her feet rocked. The guest's words echoed loudly in her head. Biological mother. 2 words she'd long ago erased from her vocabulary, buried under a thick layer of childhood resentments and adult indifference. She'd been convinced her whole life that she'd simply been discarded like an unwanted object, so she'd never tried to find the person who'd done it. "It's some kind of mistake," Paulina replied almost automatically. "Perhaps," Oleg agreed softly, "but she named the exact date of your birth and the name that was on the note when you were found." Paulina. Elsa Ivanovna said that no one but her knew this information. "This woman's name is Ludmilla Stepanovna Yemtseva. She is very ill. Frankly, she has almost no time left. For this reason, due to exceptional circumstances, she asks for only one meeting." Paulina silently looked at the envelope in her hands. It seemed heavy as a stone. A part of her adult soul, which had experienced many upheavals, screamed, "Throw it away, burn it, you don't need this pain. You've learned to live alone. Why all this sentimentality?" But another, curious, vulnerable girl from the past whispered, "What if it really is her?" The night passed in agonizing anticipation and thoughts about her childhood years spent in the orphanage. No, it wasn't like they were starving. At first glance, the little orphans had everything they needed. But except for parents and a warm family hearth. Polinka Saratinka. How many times had she heard this phrase in her nightmares? How many nights had she cried into her pillow, waiting for when the adoptive parents would choose her and no one else? Polina was always proud of herself, even when she was selling her first childishly naive bouquets at the train station. She had to stand in all kinds of weather, rain, snow, slush. Work was scarce at the time, and she never quite got the hang of her job as a dishwasher at a cafe. It was all the fault of the administrator, Vova, a married and very amorous man who immediately set his sights on the new girl. But Polina couldn't stand the dirty jokes, and one day, she doused him with water. Fortunately, it wasn't hot, but rather ice-cold from the tap. Volodya didn't forgive the insult and harbored a grudge. The cunning administrator deliberately waited for things to calm down, then struck back, slipping a jar of expensive black caviar from the special-order refrigerator into her purse. Her dismissal was swift, as was a telling dressing down at the checkpoint, where a security guard, acting on the administrator's tip, demonstratively searched her purse. Polina understood immediately and left quietly, without a fuss. Volodya thought she would return, beg, and take her back, but Polya decided to follow the dream that began in the chamomile field behind the orphanage. She didn't manage to fall asleep until midnight. Dreams, woven from scenes from the past and present, blended into one continuous kaleidoscope, making her heart beat wildly and her eyelids flutter involuntarily, no matter what. But the next day, right after breakfast, she stood by the bed in a small hospice room, bathed in pale autumn light. The woman lying on the bed was so thin and exhausted by illness that she seemed almost transparent. But when she turned her head and opened her eyes, Polina froze. They were her eyes. The same rare gray-green hue, the same cut. Polechka, the woman breathed out, and her voice was like the rustling of dry leaves. You came? I didn't even hope. Polina didn't know what to say. She felt neither anger nor joy, only a deafening emptiness and a strange, morbid curiosity. Why? It was the only question on the tip of her tongue. Why did you call me? After 35 years. Tears welled up in Ludmila's eyes, begging for forgiveness. Although I know, there is no forgiveness for me. I wanted to tell you. You have the right to know. I didn't just abandon you, I saved you, and not from just anyone, but from myself. How is that possible? Polina didn't understand. Ludmila Stepanovna brushed away a trickling tear and began speaking quietly, with long pauses to catch her breath. But her voice carried a desperate need to be heard. Ludmila Stepanovna spoke about her youth, about her marginal parents, from whom she fled in search of a better life, but a sudden and all-consuming love for a brilliant young surgeon. Andrei was so perfect, Ludmila whispered. Purposeful, handsome. Everything about him was right. Measured down to the millimeter. He built his career and life like a surgeon plans an operation, without a single unnecessary emotion or room for error. He loved me, I know, but his love was demanding and even a little cold. It was as if Andriusha wanted to make me the perfect wife for the perfect doctor, and I was a wayward, chaotic girl who was afraid of his sterile correctness. I felt like I would suffocate next to him, stop being myself. It just so happened that a week before the wedding, I went on the run, simply packed my things and moved to another city. I left only a short note, and a month later I realized I was pregnant. Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you tell him? Polina's voice was even, almost indifferent. She listened to this story as if it were someone else's melodrama. My pride and fear are to blame for everything, Ludmila admitted honestly. I was sure that Andrei would take the child, and he'll also decide that he doesn't need an imperfect mother like me. He would have raised you in his ice tower, made you into another of his flawless projects. But I wanted everything to be different for me, like in the movies. I thought I could handle it myself, a naive fool. And what was I thinking then? I really did involuntarily break away from Paulina. Meanwhile, Ludmilla continued. In short, I didn't cope. A fight with my parents, who didn't take me back. A rented room in a communal apartment, working as a cleaner under a false name so they wouldn't find me, and it was a difficult pregnancy. The doctors insisted on hospitalization for preservation, demanding expensive medications and complete rest. But I had none of that. And then you were born, and hell began. Ludmilla's voice broke. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't just fatigue or despair. It was pure horror. The doctors diagnosed severe postpartum depression, which turned into psychosis. I felt like I was being watched, that everyone wanted to harm you. Can you imagine? I barely slept. I was afraid to hold you in my arms because I felt like I could lose you. I was afraid to be alone with you, but I loved you more than life itself. My sick mind turned this love into torture. Ludmilla Stepanovna fell silent, breathing heavily, and for the first time Paulina felt the icy crust in her soul begin to crack. To her surprise, this was not a story of betrayal. On the contrary, Ludmilla's story was the story of a tragedy. One day, I had a moment of clarity. Pulling herself together, she continued. The fog in my head cleared, and I realized what was dangerous for you. That the next minute the attack could come back, and I would hurt you without meaning to. Then I made the most terrible decision of my life.